Last week, I got a text message from Nick Underwood at Audi Birmingham. Now, Nick is a character in one of my more better-known VINwiki car stories because when he worked with me at Lamborghini Atlanta, his first act of business was to buy a motorcycle that he lacked either the insurance to protect or the skills to ride, and he immediately shot himself into the back of a Porsche Panamera and destroyed its rear glass and his face. We had a very entertaining evening of shrewdly negotiating his hospital bills down to a reasonable price. But Nick has stayed in different parts of the car industry since then, and he now manages Audi of Birmingham. And his text message said that I should be proud of him because he had worked out some elaborate Ed Bolian-style deal. I said, well, please tell me more. And he explained that he had just bought $4 million worth of Audi e-trons. We did a video a couple of months ago talking about the insane depreciation of luxury electric vehicles, and that's been up to 4% per month for the last year or two, and especially the ultra high-end, the RS e-tron GT, was on that list. US consumers simply aren't adopting those cars quite as much as we like to see, or the government at least would like to see, especially at price points up to $160,000. And so he said that earlier this month, at the beginning of February, when all of the financing incentives and all the lease programs came out, he put them next to each other and recognized that if you stacked all the rebates on top of each other and discounted the selling price as aggressively as you could, and then you took the most favorable lease conditions coupled with some one-pay lease terms, adding on different programs and things like that, the lease residual for a year was actually higher than he could sell the car. Now, when you look at a lease, you've got your cap cost, which is how much you're effectively financing. It'd be the loan amount if it were a normal loan. And then you've got the residual, and you're paying that difference divided by the payments plus the interest. If the cap cost and the residual are the same, or if the residual is higher, then you can effectively be financing negative money over that term. Now, there's still going to be some interest, potentially some taxes and fees and things like that. But as he explained it, this was going to be an impossibly cheap way for his customers to own these cars. And I said, well, Nick, if it's an Ed Bolian style deal, should I come and get one? And he said, well, I don't really think of you as an EV guy. I certainly don't think of myself as an EV guy, but he said, you probably should. I mean, it's just dumb not to. And I said, well, that's not normally the thing you want to hear a car salesman say because it tends to not be all that honest. But as he explained it, he was correct. In fact, even though I don't have any real interest in driving a brand new electric vehicle or leasing an electric vehicle, I knew that my wife could certainly use one. Her GL63 just passed 120,000 miles, which means, like all aging AMG cars, it's gotten rather unreliable and expensive on maintenance. And so I would save the cost of this lease, even with the taxes and everything, in just tires, brakes, and oil, not to mention gas. And my wife drives 10, 15, 20 miles a day. It would not be a problem for any range of an electric car. But with the range these cars were supposed to have, it seemed pretty interesting. Now, they say they have like 280, 290 miles worth of range, but then of course it tells you that it's supposed to only charge to 80% for the health of the battery, which matters not on a lease. But anyway, I was very interested in kind of exploring the EV future. I really liked what Randy Popes did a couple of years ago. He bought an old ratty Tesla Model S, not because he wanted an electric car, but just because he said, as a journalist, as somebody in this industry, I owe it to anybody that cares about my opinions to really dig in and understand what electric cars are all about. Now, we compared the Tesla Model 3 to gas-guzzling supercars back in Car Trek 8, and I made it pretty clear that I'm just not really there. And, I'm not here espousing my beliefs or my ideas as some exotic car hacks way for everyone to enjoy the same thing. I like what I like because of the way that I drive and what I do. And for that, I don't really need, want, or care about an electric car, but it does behoove me to try to learn more about it. And so this felt like a good thing. Beyond that, I have never had a new car. I did for a day own a brand new Range Rover in 2014 before I exported it to Russia at a $45,000 profit. That's just because that's what we all did back then. But never had a new car, nor has my wife. And so the idea of being able to experience that sounded like an awful lot of fun. In fact, my editor for the VINwiki Car Stories actually had on order a Rivian long before the deliveries began. And when his turn came up, he was in the process of buying his first house and he chose to give up the allocation. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but having learned about it since then, I was like, hey, if we got cheap electric cars coming this way, Nick, give me 2 of them. And so I got him and my wife, and we all went out to Birmingham for the day to take delivery of or at least take the lease delivery of our brand new RS e-tron GTs. Now, this is a good opportunity to explain the difference between a new car lease and the simple lease that we talk about with Premier Financial Services. Now, Premier does this with pre-owned cars, and this is not a normal like rental lease where at the end of it, I'm just gonna turn these cars back into Audi. At the end of a Premier lease, or at any point along the way with a Premier lease, you can actually sell the car, take your equity, trade the car in, trade for something else, just pay it off and own it. And then at the end, you are still responsible for the residual. This is a strategic financing arrangement that gives you the tax benefits of a lease that I will enjoy on these Audis, as well as, you know, your lower payments, lower down payments, and everything that you get with a normal exotic car loan. And so it's a great program, but very, very different, because I do not sit here saying it is a great idea to buy new cars or lease cars and not to buy electric cars, certainly not new ones. But of course, I'm not buying it, I am just renting it. And after everything, I mean, the payment on these cars came out to like $250 a month, plus the fees and taxes and stuff like that. But again, less than I would have paid on consumables for her gas SUV, which she'll maintain if she needs to drive more kids around or do the things that she does. So it was a really interesting arrangement to prolong the life of a car that was certainly getting up there, at least in unreliability, if not real miles compared to a Toyota or anything like that. And she loves it. And I'll be honest, I mean, the novelty of a new car with all these fancy buttons and stuff was interesting. It's very different than driving a Diablo or a Mercy or a Spiker or something like that. And so I was intrigued. But most of all, I was intrigued by what Nick was doing. I mean, when you think about the new car business or the used car business, the car dealership business model, finding strategic deals and taking advantage of whatever the opportunities are out there is really how you become successful. And I was very, very proud of Nick to have figured this out. Now, I have no idea how many more of these this will apply to, but these are the February leasing programs for the RS e-tron GT. Now, we had to get the top of the line model, the RS, versus just an e-tron GT, because that's where the sweet spot was in terms of the discounts available, as they were trying to emulate some of the government incentives that the car doesn't qualify because it's not made in America and things like that. But regardless, it was a really, really unique deal. Now, I believe these kinds of deals are going to continue to pop up more and more often across all manufacturers. So if there is an electric vehicle that you like, keep an eye out, talk to your dealer, and let them know, like, when something like this happens, maybe not to this extent, that you want to be the first call because you want to come in and pick. Now, by the time he called me, he wanted to make sure that the deals were actually funding and things like that. So I think he had sourced a little over 20 of them, and he'd sold 13 or 14. He had 4 left. We took 2, and the other 2 were sold by the time we got there the next day. He's trying to get more, so if you'd like to replicate this deal, feel free to contact the team at Audi Birmingham. They are well familiar with how it works and what it takes. And for them, this helps their RS allocation. For other cars, it just helps the numbers for the dealership, even if each individual deal isn't all that profitable. But that's really what the new car business model is all about. Get the volume, meet the bonuses, all the things, and at the end of the year, usually it becomes a very, very big success. And so, great job, Nick. Thank you to Nick and all the team at Audi Birmingham for making it possible. And the car is phenomenally fast. So this is effectively a Taycan Turbo S with Audi rings on the front of it. So it's supposed to have the equivalent of like 637 horsepower, goes 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. And so my wife is now hauling the kids around in a car that's faster than any of the Lamborghinis that I've ever owned. And I love it. You know, it's not that it's really that dramatically fast most of the time. It drives around like a golf cart and makes its whizzy noises and stuff like that. But it is very pretty. It's very nice to have all this newness. I will say that the moment you drive it, the first thing that happens to most of us is that if you exceed the speed limit by 1 mile per hour, it starts dinging and flashing all these errors. And it takes several presses of a button to finally get through a menu to turn off these traffic speed limit sign alert ding thing. So some of this stuff is super annoying, and it makes me glad that my Mercedes don't even have a radio that works. But regardless, it is the way of the world now, I suppose. And I am, I guess, very, very happy to have joined the future. But I'm also pretty happy that in a year or so I get to give the future back. Successful car purchasing is all about knowing your buying power and being able to move quickly. And the best way to do that is getting pre-qualified with Premier Financial Services. Call one of these numbers, speak to one of their representatives, fill out their application, and then you'll know exactly how much car you can buy. You'll approach a seller, tell them you're already qualified, you've got your simple lease set up from Premier Financial, and you'll be able to close very, very quickly. That's why Premier is one of the most powerful partners in the world of exotic car financing, and that's why I turn to them every time I go out and try to buy something crazy.